The sun hung mercilessly over the desert sky, bleeding gold and fire across the endless horizon. Dust swirled through the air as the wheels of the wagon creaked against the sand, carrying two grinning cowboys who treated cruelty as if it were sport. Beneath that wagon, crawling in chains, was an Apache woman named Naya, her wrists raw from the iron biting into her skin, her lips cracked from thirst, her heart crushed by humiliation. The men laughed as she stumbled, dragging her frail body forward, taunting her in their rough English she barely understood. Once she had been proud, the daughter of a tribal leader, strong and fierce, her spirit unbroken like the wind that howled across the plains. But ever since her people were driven from their land, Naya had known only pain. These men had captured her after a raid, mocking her, stripping her of her dignity, calling her savage while forcing her to serve them as a slave on their journey west. That afternoon, as the wagon halted near a small creek, Naya collapsed beside it, her body trembling. She pressed her forehead against the dirt, whispering prayers to the spirits of her ancestors. Her voice trembled. "It hurts. They humiliated me. Great Spirit, please don't. Let me die like this." Her tears darkened the dust beneath her cheek. The cowboys laughed again, tossing scraps of food her way as if she were an animal. One of them, a tall, dark-haired man named Cooper, kicked her lightly with his boot, sneering, "You better get up, squaw, or we'll leave you for the buzzards." But his companion, younger and quieter, looked uneasy. His name was Luke, a rancher's son from the nearby town of Dust Hollow. He had joined Cooper for money and adventure, not cruelty. And though he'd laughed at first, something about the sight of Naya's suffering stirred, something buried deep within him, a human ache he hadn't felt in years. That night, as the others drank whiskey by the campfire, Luke sat apart, staring at Naya. She lay by the wagon, her hands trembling, whispering softly in her native tongue. The moonlight fell over her face, and for a moment Luke saw not a captive, but a person, a woman robbed of everything, yet still breathing, still enduring. The flicker of guilt in his chest grew stronger. He remembered his mother's voice when she was dying. "Son, never let a man's cruelty make you cruel too." Luke rose quietly, his boots crunching softly against the dirt, and walked toward her. Naya flinched as his shadow fell over her, expecting another blow. But instead she heard his low whisper, "Don't be afraid." He knelt and offered her a tin cup of water. She stared at him with disbelief, her parched lips trembling. Slowly she drank, the water spilling down her chin. When she looked up, her eyes met his, weary yet full of a silent question. "Why?" she managed to whisper. Luke swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. "Because no one deserves this," he finally said. The next morning, as the sun climbed over the horizon, the men prepared to move on. But Luke's mind was already made up. When Cooper went to tighten Naya's chains, Luke stepped between them. "Leave her," he said. Cooper frowned, confused. "You've gone soft, boy. She's property." Luke's hand moved to his gun. "She's no one's property." The silence that followed was thick with danger. Cooper laughed, but there was a tremor in his voice. "You planning to fight me for her?" Luke didn't blink. "If I have to." The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like eternity. Then in a flash, Cooper drew his revolver, and Luke shot first. The sound echoed across the canyon. Cooper fell, his eyes wide in shock. Naya gasped, chains rattling as she pulled herself back. Luke dropped the smoking gun and turned to her, his face pale. "We have to go," he said. She hesitated, still in disbelief. "Why would you save me?" Luke met her eyes with quiet sorrow. "Because it's the right thing to do." And as the two of them disappeared into the desert, one bleeding from the heart, the other from the soul, the wind whispered across the plains, carrying away the cries of the past. Days passed, and the desert became both their enemy and their refuge. Luke and Naya traveled by night, hiding by day, the chains around her wrists finally broken but leaving scars that would never fade. He guided her to his family's old ranch on the outskirts of Dust Hollow, a place long abandoned since the war took his father. The wooden fences leaned under the weight of time, but it was safe, at least for now. Naya looked around in silence, her eyes scanning the empty land that stretched as far as the horizon. "You live here?" she asked softly. Luke nodded. "Used to. Now it's just a ghost's home. But maybe we can bring it back to life." She didn't answer, just turned her gaze toward the sunset. The sky burned red and gold like fire meeting blood. For the first time in years, Luke felt peace settle in his chest. Yet he knew trouble wasn't far behind. Cooper's friends would be coming. And if they found Naya, there would be no mercy. As night fell, he found her sitting by the old barn, whispering to the stars in her native tongue. When he asked what she was saying, she replied, "I thank the spirits for giving me one good man among many devils." Her words struck deep. He wanted to tell her he didn't deserve it, that he'd stood by too long before doing what was right. But she touched his hand and said quietly, "The past burns away when you choose to save, not destroy." Days turned into weeks. Together they worked, mending fences, planting seeds, bringing life to dead land. Slowly, she began to smile again, though her scars told stories that would never fade. But peace in the Wild West was a fragile thing. One morning, smoke rose on the horizon. Riders were coming. Luke loaded his rifle, his jaw set. Naya stood beside him, clutching a bow she had crafted herself. "If we fight together," she said. He smiled faintly. "No, I'll end this." He rode out alone to face the gang, Cooper's brother among them, demanding vengeance. The standoff was fierce and brutal. Dust swirled as bullets flew. Luke was outnumbered, but fought with the strength of a man who had something worth dying for. When it was over, he lay bleeding in the sand, the last of the attackers fleeing into the horizon. Naya ran to him, her cries echoing across the land. "Don't leave me," she begged, tears falling on his chest. He looked up at her, smiling faintly through the pain. "You're free now," he whispered. "Promise me you'll live." She held his hand tightly, sobbing, "No, you saved me. Now I'll save you." She dragged him back to the ranch, nursing him through fever and pain. For weeks she cared for him, her songs filling the nights. When Luke finally opened his eyes again, he found her sitting by the fire, mending his shirt. She turned and smiled. "You came back." He reached out and took her hand. "Guess I wasn't done living yet." Under the red sky of the Wild West, two broken souls found peace, not as captor and captive, but as equals bound by something stronger than chains. The desert had witnessed their pain, their fight, and their redemption. And somewhere in that endless silence, the spirits of her ancestors whispered that freedom had finally come. Again, note for viewers: if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Every subscription helps us bring more powerful Wild West stories of courage, pain, and redemption. Stories that prove even in the harshest lands, humanity still shines.